What's up, everybody? It is Peaceful here. We are going to go over the new card, Black Knight. I'm going to give you my thoughts on it, my opinions, and let you know whether I think you should pick this card up this week in Marvel Snap. Before we get into that, as always, if you enjoy this content, please make sure you are subscribed. It helps me grow as a channel. Trust me, I hate having to say this every single time, but you would be shocked how many of you are not subscribed. We have a lot of my regular viewers, I think it's something like 86% who are not subscribed. So please, if you enjoy the content, subscribe. Make sure you don't miss any of my videos when they come out. Hit the like button, comment down below what other types of content you'd like to see. And without any further ado, let's get into it. So this is the Black Knight. He is a 1 cost 2 power. Says after you discard a card, add the Ebony Blade to your hand with that card's power once per game. Now, one thing to note, the card Ebony Blade is always 4 cost, and it gains the power of the first card you discard while Black Knight is in play. So it does matter with, say, something like MODOK, what order the cards are in your hand, because you discard cards left to right from my experience playing with the card. So make sure you have a good card on the left. It's very important when it comes to this card if you're going to play him with a card like MODOK. Now let's go over some of the synergies that you will discover with this card. So the most obvious one, obviously, is Lady Sif, and then cards like Infinaut and such that are extremely large and very, will make that Ebony Blade very, very, very powerful. This combines very, very well. Well, part of it combines very, very well with Taskmaster in that if you are able to set up the Lady Sif into Infinaut, play a 4 cost Ebony Blade, curves perfectly into a turn 5 Taskmaster, giving you two 20 power units. This was by far the most powerful synergy I found with this card. And this is when I was looking at this card, I was like, oh, this is pretty impressive. This is really strong. This is definitely the kind of thing you want to try to be setting up. I've seen a lot of people experimenting with the Zabu shell because you can get that discount on the Ebony Blade and set up some better turns. Just being able to put out a ton of power play a little bit more to the board, and this deck can do some powerful thing. There's a couple different builds of this that are definitely capable of winning games of Marvel Snap. However, I do have some issues with this card that I did want to cover before we move on, and I give you my verdict on what I think of the card overall. So the biggest issues I discovered personally were consistency. So consistency in getting your combo together. There's a very delicate balance when you're running things like Taskmaster and Infinaut with Lady Sif. It's like there's a lot of times when you get to the point where you need to discard a card in order to activate the Ebony Blade, and you just the biggest card in your hand is Taskmaster, or something similar where you haven't drawn your big 6 drops yet. So there is a critical mass of big cards you have to run in order to make this work, and it's a very delicate balance. And to be perfectly honest, I wasn't able to find one that I was comfortable with without making my non-Ebony Blade draws extremely clunky. So, it's the classic problem you get in Snap where you only have 12 cards and you also only have 6 turns. So if you don't draw the Ebony Blade early enough, you've set up your deck in order to take advantage of all these other synergies, and then you just don't have the card you need to capitalize on it. And this came up a uncomfortably large amount of times. Now, on top of that, people are already running Shadow King everywhere because of the prevalence of decks running Elsa and things benefiting from those extra stats, Angela, things like that. So Shadow King is just an extremely popular card. He now is in just a huge percentage of decks, which means you really want to run Luke Cage if you're going to try and run Black Knight. But that just creates its own problems in making your deck more inconsistent when your deck is already inconsistent, given the nature of discard decks like this that run Ghost Rider and such things. This almost feels like a worse version of Hell to me, where you're trying to discard big things in a certain order, but you also have to draw your main card that you're building around on turn 1 or 2 so that you can curve into these discard cards. So it's just extremely inconsistent. And that's what I mean here by output versus build around. It takes a lot to get this card to work. And there were games where I did my combo pretty well, discarded something big, played the Ebony Blade and Taskmaster and all that stuff, and still lost to Elsa decks that just get to curve out and play their cards because all their cards are just good and they don't need that build around. And that is speaks to a slight design problem I see with Marvel Snap in general right now at this moment. It's not always been a problem, and I don't think it always will be a problem. I think they will eventually find the right balance. But there is an issue right now in Snap where things like destroy and discard feel like you have to disproportionately build around them in order to make them work, and they still just have trouble sometimes outputting the same amount of power as these more straightforward decks that are just running good cards like Angela, Elsa, Silk, things like this. So I don't know that I should count this as strictly a knock against just Black Knight, but it is definitely a problem if you're trying to run a deck of this type. It just makes it very, very, very difficult for you to achieve what other decks are achieving just simply by playing their cards. And that's a pretty feels bad. So what's my verdict on this card? Well, we've kind of gone over some of the things that I see as being problematic with this card in general. It being something you need to draw early in order to make the synergies work, having a lot of build around and all that stuff. Now, that said, there were some games that I won that were pretty cool where I go turn 4, Ebony Blade for 20, Taskmaster for 20, and Ghost Rider on turn 6 for another 20 power unit. And then I was like, wow, this deck's busted. But there were far, far more games where I just could not get the pieces to go together, and my deck just looked pitiful in comparison to what my opponents were doing. So I'm going to do something a little different today. Here's my verdict. Do not pick up this card, please. It is not very good. I think even if you didn't have the problem of Elsa decks, just being able to put out similar power for a lot less build around, I think this deck would still just be a worse version of discard. Just go run your Modocs, go run your Apocalypses, and all that other stuff if you really want to make this deck work. I didn't find a deck that I was comfortable sharing with you, so I'm not going to. This is going to be the end of the video. I know it's a little shorter than what I normally do, but I try and keep things real here on my channel. I like to make sure I'm helping you all out as best I can. That's why, when I put out a video, I try and give you my honest opinion of how good a deck is, because I want you all to be able to trust that if you take a deck that I give you, that it's going to perform at least reasonably well. So I'm not giving you a deck. There's no deck list in the description. There's no video content. I don't want you to see some cool games of Black Knight and be like, oh, I should buy this card. Don't. It's a much harder pass than it was last week for Man Thing. This is just not a very good card right now. It's too hard to make it work. If you have a deck that you think proves me wrong, please share it with me. Let me know in the comments, because I would love to be proven wrong, because I think this is a really cool design. But unfortunately, it's going to be a no today. So thank you all so much for hanging out. I really appreciate the support. Remember, I stream live almost every day on twitch.tv/peaceful C. In fact, if you're watching this right now, I'm pretty sure if this is Thursday, I'm doing a giveaway. So come hang out. See if you can get some free Marvel Snap loot, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for hanging out. Bye.